right, good afternoon. If everyone could find their seats, we'll call the workshop to order. All right, I've got 1:32. I'd like to call to order the workshop for the Board of County Commissioners for May 2nd, 2023. Let's begin with our county manager, who'd like to make a few comments to open us up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mr. Cody will make the presentation today.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, we didn't tell you?
Welcome to the team.
Wow. First, right out of the gate. Commissioners, I'd like to...
Welcome.
Yeah. I'd like to go back in time just a little bit and we can remind ourselves of where we've been and how far we've come and a little bit about what we're about to deal with over the next couple of budget cycles. Pete's going to cover that for you today, but you know, I remember back in 2013, 2014, you started to create policies that gave us the opportunity to start with budget workshops earlier in the year, so there was more time to discuss your priorities. You allowed us to begin programming dollars from all of the funds in the most efficient way possible, different combinations of dollars from different funds that were either restricted, partially restricted, or unrestricted, and that really did allow us to get much farther down the road on our capital projects because it was far more efficient. You gave us specific guidance on prioritizing road projects. I remember the conversation with the board that day, and you all were frustrated with the road CIP that appeared to change from one year to the next based on priorities that came from other than the county commission. And you told us there were four roads that you wanted to have built, and as quickly as possible. So I went to the 2013 presentation and I pulled out Estero Boulevard at the price at that time, $68 million. Homestead Road at 33, Alico at 16, Burnt Store at 35, and then later in that year, Three Oaks was added to that priority list. So we have some completion. We're well down the path on the other projects. Have not gone as fast as we would all like. There've been circumstances beyond our control that we've all talked about in the past. I won't talk about today. But then you also adopted a pay-as-you-go strategy for the CIP, because if you go back over time, and Pete will cover this today, the value of the investments that have been made since 2014, 2015, I think, and we started at the end of fiscal year 12-13 with a $37 million deficit. And then from 2013 to date, you've thrown off ending reserves of almost $1 billion, $939 million in total. And of that, you've invested $248 million in infrastructure, pay-as-you-go projects, road projects. At the same time, you adopted the growth increment finance accounting method that allows us to use new tax dollars from one year to the next for infrastructure projects. Well, we're now at the point, and we discussed this in the transportation workshop, where for a number of reasons beyond anyone's control, that include inflation, hurricane, recovery costs, and other things, that we can no longer do pay-as-you-go for all our road projects. The pay-as-you-go was a policy and strategy that allowed us to save our bonding capacity for when we actually needed it down the road. Last year, we issued a $100 million bond, but we don't have revenue sources to service debt beyond that, not much beyond that anyway. And so decisions that are going to have to be made this year, next year, and the following year are going to be difficult. And, it may require some reprioritizing, because at the same time, that all of that was happening over these last 7, 8 years, you also placed great emphasis on public safety. And that has worked. If you take a look at crime statistics in Lee County, they're lower than just about any other place in the state, and in many parts of the country. Pre-hospital care, you've made a huge investment in, and that pays big dividends with the growth in population that continues in spite of hurricanes and everything else that goes on. The population continues to grow, so goes the demand for service. EMS responses, utilities, solid waste, and anything else that's driven by population increase is just stunning. So today, we'd like to talk with you about the budget assumptions to really kick off the budget season. And when we get to the end of this presentation, I'd like to talk about how you think about these assumptions. Do they sound about right to you? Do you want to change any of them? And what do we need to discuss? One of the things that's important about today's conversation is on the 22nd, I think, of June, we'll be in strategic planning for a day. And this information and decisions that you make on some of these assumptions will be really important to us when we get to that conversation. So, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, with that, I'll ask Pete to get started.
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I think one of the overarching theme for this year's budget development is going to be Hurricane Ian impacts. We're dealing with the carrying costs of the emergency work we did immediately following the hurricane, and also all the permanent repairs we're doing on our facilities and infrastructure. We're experiencing revenue losses this year. That keeps looking better and better, and I'll get into that in a few slides. And then the impacts to the development of the fiscal year 23-24 budget. So there's a lot of moving parts here in this budget. Oh, here, let me just go back and. These are the upcoming workshops. May 16th, you'll get the draft capital program and major maintenance, and there's very few new capital items on that. And that's not Hurricane Ian related. It's just that it's a pretty full capital plan already in place. June 20th will be the first draft of the continuation budget. August 1st, you'll come back and set the maximum millage and get the second draft of the budget. And then August 15th, final draft, and then our two budget public hearings in September. And as always, there will be two questions we ask at the end of this presentation will become apparent to you. Do you agree with the basic assumptions? And is there anything else you would like to add to the assumptions as we go through this? Yeah. One time I held one of those things to like this the entire workshop, but I'll try to. Let's see. So, just the financial summary this year is, we're dealing with making sure we have adequate cash flow in order to recover all of our costs for our emergency work and for our permanent repairs. As I said before, the current year revenue impacts, and then we're developing the upcoming budget. So it's a limited number of assumptions, Commissioners, unless you wanted to add some more at the end. But our main assumption each year is to present the continuation budget, which is the budget to provide the same level of services from year to year. That doesn't mean it's flat in cost. It just means you're providing the exact same service level. There may be some costs in there that have increased. We're trying to be as flat as possible this coming year, but I'm sure there will be increases in some areas. Top priority, rebuild from Hurricane Ian, rebuilding of particularly our parks and our infrastructure. Use of excess reserves, I'll show you in a few slides that, and as Roger alluded to, we've thrown off a significant amount of excess reserves in the general fund over the last so many years, and we've used those extensively for capital projects, for things that don't have their own funding source, dedicated funding source, and other items. But I think because of Ian and our revenue losses, we're probably going to see less of excess reserves that's thrown off to use for other items this year. We'll just have to wait and see. But you know, the last 3 years we've used more than 20 million each year. This past year, 40 million. None of that has been drawn back. That's all been placed where it needs to be placed. But that excess reserves this coming year could be significantly reduced from that. And then asking for a need for flexibility. Later in the budget process, we'll probably have a real good idea at that time of what our exact revenue losses are. And then there may be some expenses at the end, and I'm going to point out one, which is property insurance. We've budgeted a 28% increase in our property insurance rates, and a lot of that was based on Ian, but also the rates that came in last year just prior to the storm. We think that could potentially go up. So later in the budget process, we may need to make some adjustments for that. So, Commissioners, you get this weekly, and this is just a brief overview of kind of where we stand with, particularly in the carrying costs and cash flow area. At the top, we've received $61 million of advances for Hurricane Ian, about $51 million from FEMA, and $10 million from insurance. And that's the extent of the advances we expect at this point until we put in specific projects to get reimbursed for the actual costs. We've paid about $117 million to date, and along the right-hand side you can see where most of that has gone. The preponderance is solid waste and the debris cleanup, about $92 million. And we've done that all either with those advances or absorbing that into fund balances, which we will continue to do as long as possible before, as you can see at the lower left-hand corner, hitting that Bank of America line of credit, which carries an interest rate. That interest rate's running about 4.37% today. It's a daily overnight funds rate, so it's not an insignificant interest rate. So we want to push off as long as possible hitting that line of credit. We're also applying, we should have the application into the state this week for $25 million bridge loan that the legislature put together, a $50 million pot for that. And we're also applying for a $5 million community disaster loan from FEMA. Then this is what we're paying for with our cash flow needs. And this has changed a little bit since I pulled this, but this is about $330 million of costs that we have to upfront the funds and then get reimbursement. And a lot of that is, of course, in debris and the emergency response during and just following the hurricane. And then you can see the permanent work below that. So there have been some changes there, but generally those are the major categories of where those repairs and costs reside. And then this is something that you've seen, but we update this every 2 months. The last update was in March. So the next time we have a meeting in June on the budget, on the operating budget, we'll have another update. I want to point out a few things here. And I was talking to Commissioner Ruane yesterday, and he was asking about the net number on some of these. So you can see, VC, the tourist development tax, we originally estimated about $26 million revenues based on, estimated revenue of $61 million. I can tell you a couple things. One is we're already almost at $25 million as of this month. So I think we're expecting in the $33, maybe $37 million revenue range for tourist development taxes. And also we've pulled, we're not doing a lot of advertising. There's a lot of beach and shoreline stuff that isn't being done because we're doing permanent repairs. So, there's not money that's going toward that. I just looked at it this morning, and as far as the operating budget for the Visitor and Convention Bureau, they're at 30% spent so far this year, And if you take it by month, 7 months out of 12, we're at 58%. If you were just spending on a monthly percentage. So they're well below their spend rate. So I guess the point of that is you do have tourist tax reserves, but we will try to project how much we'll eat into that, but we may not have to eat into that significantly. We'll just have to see. Yes.
If I could, Commissioners, it's a good time to inform you. I had an opportunity this year. I get to sit as the chair of the TDC. And we had our beach and shoreline workshop last week, and the TDC. So this is where like people, from local municipalities and other agencies propose their beach and shoreline projects, and the number of projects proposed exceeded the budget that they had allocated for this upcoming year by about like $1.5 million, if I'm remembering right. Is that the number? I don't know if they got back with you and followed up.
Yeah, not quite sure, Commissioner.
But the group at the workshop was going to recommend to the full TDC that they recommend to the Board of Commissioners to go ahead and fund all the projects. I think the reserves in the TDT fund right now are like close to $43 million. Plus, it sounds like we're already tracking well ahead of pace what we estimated this year too. So just wanted to let you know that was a decision that was coming from that group at the workshop. It's a recommendation that may be coming our way, and just kind of as your liaison to that board, keeping you in the loop on that one.
I have a question. Yes, sir. Commissioner, any of those projects, I didn't see the list of projects, but were they by any chance being asked because of damage from the storm and they were turned down for FEMA reimbursement, or the cities weren't able to replace it?
So we did have a lengthy discussion with all the applicants to make sure that they didn't request for anything that they're going to request for FEMA reimbursement for or insurance reimbursement for. So the money that they're going to request for FEMA reimbursement or insurance reimbursement was pulled out of their request.
I just know we all sat there at one time, and there's always requesting for, kayak launches, or it could be bathrooms, it could be machinery for cleanup of the beaches. Didn't know if it was because it was damaged or what it was from. That's what I was asking. Thank you.
Yep. No, happy to. Yes, sir.
So, just to follow up on Pete's conversation with me and Commissioner Hammond, I appreciate your insight on VCB. That's an exact example. Revenue that we're off is a number, and I don't look at gross revenue, I look at net. So obviously the corresponding expenses. So to me, I'd love to know, and I shared that with Pete, not to understand what the gross revenue loss is, but what is the true net effect? What are we out of cash? Because obviously in the TDC, if we budget for 60 million and we curtailed marketing to X degree, well, we didn't burn through 35 million, we burned through something less.
Right.
Secondarily, to your other point is, love to know the reserve that we have in those categories, because we do have some flexibility. So when we go over the necessary amount, we're making decisions because we have adequate reserves, and that's what they're there for. I understand the juggling act that Pete has to do, but I'm trying to understand cash flow as we're borrowing money and the need to borrow money. So what are our reserves? What's our true net loss revenue, not gross? Because to me, having sat on the TDC is like you gentlemen have in a different capacity. As a municipality, I understood the way the money's spent, and I knew that it was allocated between marketing, obviously beach and shorelines, and bond payments. And to my understanding, the bond payments were due. The other things had greater flexibility on when they need to be expended. So I just was trying to get an actual revenue loss as opposed to a loss of revenue projection. Revenue at the top line, my dad would always say, I don't care what your top line is, it's what your bottom line is. And that's what I'd really like to concentrate on. So I did have those conversations, and Pete alluded to those. So that'll be helpful as we go deeper into this to understand what impacts cash flow has. It also gives Pete a much greater determination on when we have to draw and what we want to draw, because we could look at reserves, and the only thing we're losing in reserves is potentially the investment income that we're earning on that. We could pay ourselves back that amount of money, but that's going to be cheaper than the 4.something% that we're going to have to borrow the money from. So decisions like that I look forward to talking with you all about.
Yeah, absolutely, Commissioner. We'll put together those numbers for the June workshop as well as we can project at that point. Some of these are different funds, so some of these are not a huge concern because they have very good reserves and spending has been pulled back. I did add something, if you look at the bottom yesterday, for ad valorem. We hadn't really projected that too much, but I did talk to the property appraiser, Matt Caldwell, and we are getting from the tax collector a running total, basically monthly, of the number of property tax refunds that have been processed and sent out to folks. And to date, that's 6,400. I was asking Matt what was the total that he'd received by April 1st. He said about 19,000. So it looks like we're about a third of the way through processing those. And to date, the impact of those in the general fund, which is the largest impact, was about $2 million. So what we did is we extrapolated that to 19,000 based on, saying the average per household was about the same. And it looked like in the general fund maybe a hit of about 5.9 million, which we will go to the legislature then and see if we can maybe tap that $350 million fund. But and then in library and unincorporated MSTU and all hazards, it was very little impact at this point. So that number 6.3 million at the bottom there is what we've projected if aim from 6,400 to 19,000 processed. So each year we use excess reserves for a number of things. One is for, as I stated before, county capital projects where something like EMS doesn't have its own dedicated funding source, or Parks and Rec, certain Parks and Rec projects, particularly natural resources projects. Last year we used $39.5 million of that, and also for the sheriff's capital. And that was for 2 years. It was for 22, 23, and 23, 24. So we kind of got a year ahead on that. This year, like I said, I think we'll throw off less, but there are some knowns that we will have to fund, and let me go through those. The supervisor of elections is making a request of $240,000 to buy enough express vote machines, which to have one in each of the voting precincts. This is for the elections next year, the sheriff each year, when the sheriff purchased all of the digital radios that were compliant with the new digital emergency radio system, it was like a $9 or $10 million cost, and we financed that over several years. So that's $1.4 million a year that we've paid out of excess reserves. We still have that payment to make. The third item here is really not something that will come out of excess reserves. The way the sheriff's office wants to do this is they receive some reimbursement already for FEMA, and they feel like they have capacity in their budget. What they'd like to do is return that money to us, and then us turn around and give it right back for a couple of their highest priority capital projects: the expansion of their real-time information center, and then renovation of their fleet operation there off of a metro by the airport. And then just added one thing here: property insurance. We budgeted a 28% increase, which all the departments are paying for, and that could go higher. We just won't know until probably in the August time frame. So we're still in an environment of cost increases. I just mentioned the property insurance. While inflation is ameliorated, it's still running at about 5% year over year, and our road projects have gone up significantly. Population, the county's still growing at a tremendous rate, and I'm just showing you this slide of where we're going to be in 2030, which is about 1 million people. And the April 2022 estimate from the University of Florida Bureau of Economic and Business Research was a little over 800,000 for Lee County. This chart, Commissioners, I've shown you many times over the years. This goes just right before the recession, and then through the recession and recovery. And then the projection, the 6-year projection based on revenue estimating conference that the state has each year. The state estimates all property tax revenues for all the counties twice a year typically. So you can see we had a 17.3% increase in the tax base last year prior to Ian, and the numbers in white. So for this coming year, the Revenue Estimating Conference is estimating an 8.6% increase in the tax base for Lee County, and that has been adjusted for hurricane impacts. So you can imagine that what that would have looked like had there not been a Hurricane Ian.
Pete, Commissioners, just a reminder for everyone who sees these numbers, you take a look at the 17% last year and the projections going forward, just a reminder that every homesteaded property in Lee County can only increase taxable value by 3%, maximum from 1 year to the next. So there's not a 17% increase in corresponding revenue increase with that 17%. It's far less.
Right. This is a combination of, the three things that we talk about, which is just you stayed in your home, nothing happened, your home appreciated in value, sales back and forth the home, so people come and buy an existing home. When that happens, there's a reset on the Save Our Homes benefit, so the home price goes up and you start doing that Save Our Home benefit, starting that again, and then a new construction. Just as an example, Commissioners, Charlotte County, the estimating conference has at 14.34% next year, Collier 16.88%. They were impacted by Ian and not nearly as much as we were. So you can imagine what the property tax base would have gone up without the hurricane, but it's still a positive number. Roger alluded to this. This just kind of shows general fund history over the last 10 or 15 years when we've implemented certain policies such as the continuation budget, growth increment funding, et cetera. And you can see the use of excess reserves, $160 million invested in projects and other things, growth increment funding, and then a few other sources. But you see the negatives there. That's a forecasted deficit. It's a structural deficit based on budget. So, we forecast our revenues, we forecast our expenses. Our expenses were a little higher than our revenues, and that's a risk that we've taken in the past, and we typically grow out of that in 1 year. So now, we'll grow out of that, but we'll have to use some of the growth in the tax base to get back to even, so to speak. And Commissioners, this is I just put this up on the general fund just to show kind of the split that, your general fund pays for a lot of stuff other than county departments. The sheriff, as always, is the largest budget in the general fund, which is not atypical. And then you have your other constitutionals and courts, and then your operating departments. And then your other large property tax fund, unincorporated MSTU, and transportation is the big department in that budget. So Commissioners, here are the upcoming workshops. Again, our basic assumptions: continuation budget, top priority, Hurricane Ian rebuild. Use of excess reserves, yes, but may not have as many as we have in the past. And then just some flexibility needed in this process where we may be making some changes a little later in the process than we typically do based on the best information we have at the time. And with that, any comments or questions?
We got Commissioner Ruane.
Sure. Pete, thanks. Everything on the budget kind of talks about negativity. Unfortunately, we're off $62 million. There's opportunities, and I didn't hear sales tax, which I know we're trending per the REC at record paces. So again, for me to have an appreciation, I'm trying to get to net cash that we're out. Gross cash really doesn't help. $6.2 million in ad valorem taxes. We have opportunities in the DEO and DEM to fill those holes with revenue replacement. I'm just trying to get a feel for what our true negative cash is. Everything here is a negative number. Sales tax, we all know, is at record highs, and no place do I have a sales tax number in any of the charts you gave me. Having seen the REC's forecast, we're trending $7 billion above where we were, so I can't imagine the county's not receiving more. I'm just trying to get an accurate cash flow number, net, not gross. And I don't know why sales tax wouldn't be included.
Okay, we'll get you that, Commissioner. And yes, we are trending not hugely above last year, but a little bit above last year, which was a record year, and that was $71 million in sales tax. So we should come out a little bit ahead of that, but not hugely as far as the sharing with the state goes.
And the grants that you're going to apply for, the DEO or DEM or both?
We're going to apply for both the state bridge loan, $25 million, and the FEMA grant, which is $5 million max.
So Department of Economic Opportunity is where you're going to apply for the 25 mil?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Didn't the Department of Emergency Management initially have a program as well?
No, I believe they work with FEMA on the community disaster loan. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you could do that, understanding the reserves that we have, understanding what the net revenue loss is going to be, understanding what cash looks like, it's hard to do so. Understand that we're in an environment that obviously have costs at astronomical numbers, and the commission, I applaud you all for doing what you did. Roger keyed this off with $1 billion that we spent in the last 10 years, which is great. Inflation's starting to catch up with us. I certainly want to continue to take care of the people that went through some unordinary times first and foremost. But to do that, I just really am trying to get my arms around what is our negative cash number, what that looks like, to see where we are. The other thing is that we continue to make sure that we identify the projects and things we need to do and what opportunities might be available to Tallahassee to make sure we do the avocation. I think we did extraordinarily well there. There is a pot of money under the TED area of $350 million that should be able to plug some holes in our budget. That was both approved in the House and the Senate. It's in the period right now of cool down for 72 hours. So I can't imagine the governor vetoing that. So I just really want to see accurate cash flow numbers. It just makes, to me right now, gross numbers aren't nearly as helpful to me as someone that's been in the budget world for 30 plus years.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Commissioner, we're happy to provide that to you. And admittedly, this is a very conservative view of the coming year. And we have in the office had a lot of discussion about what the coming year looks like, and then the following year. My concern is far more. I'm far more concerned for the following year than the coming, than the cycle that we're in right now. The property values that will be set by the estimate at June 1 by the property appraiser are based on the values as of January 1 of 2023. Most of 2022 was during a period before the hurricane. So property values are likely to be, pretty good. What we don't know is what kind of loss of value we'll have the following year. So we get January 1 of 2024. That it's a big mystery at the moment. So as we always do, we try to insert some caution in here and probably more for others than for the county commission, is to manage expectations. In 24-25 budget year, there's a pretty good chance there are going to be some really difficult decisions to be made.
And I appreciate, Roger. I guess when I look at this, I don't want anyone from staff to think anything negative.
Yes, sir.
To me, they're the backbone of this organization. If I have to cut a project to make sure we take care of the people that are working for us, that's my priority. I want to try to understand it, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. The next couple of years are going to be the challenge, and how we balance everything and what we do. But we've made Lee County be the first choice. And I want to continue to make sure when you hear negative news that you don't think the world's ending. And that's probably my point. We have a lot of challenges in front of us. We have a lot of opportunities. And I think we'll more than get through this. But I can't thank the people that I worked side by side with all the other commissioners during the hurricane time. And I don't want them to worry too much about the negatives that are on a page.
Thank you, Commissioner. We feel exactly the same way. Recruitment and retention is more important today than it's ever been. There's a labor shortage in some sectors, and we're competing with other government entities, private sector, and everybody else. Besides the policies created by the county commission, which have put us in a position to be in really good financial shape, is because of the work done by the employees. If they weren't completely invested in the work they do, we wouldn't be in this position. So we have a great appreciation for what you just said and feel the same way.
Just thought it was important that a county commissioner, I know they all feel the same way. We're always been supportive, but I want people to understand we're going to get through these times, and we'll do what we need to do. And if it means to defer a capital project and make sure we continue to take care of our people, that's what we'll do. It's that simple. Thank you, sir.
Any other comments, commissioners, on the questions that they're asking us here?
I'm good with both.
Commissioners, is there any additional information that you would like in preparation for coming budget conversations?
Yeah, I had a thought, if that's okay.
Please.
So, going back to slide 9, we kind of talked about some of the costs with the supervisor of elections office, some of the costs that the sheriff's office is going to have. I think each of us have gotten a chance to meet with the medical examiner's office. I look at slide 11 and the population projections. We're already at 800,000, bigger than the state of Alaska, bigger than the state of North Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming in population. Like bigger than 4 entire states in population. And when you think about, I've been out to the medical examiner's office to tour and see the operation. The work that she does in such a small facility with the tools that she has is actually really impressive. And, she visited, and I think she asked for some things that weren't really unreasonable, expanding the facility, maybe a second vehicle, because now she's got, multiple cases she's working, and they only have one vehicle that they're going to transport people with. I would just ask, as we look at the second question here, is there anything you would like to add to the assumptions? Could we look at accommodating some of her requests to deal with the population growth that we know she's facing and the pressure that she's facing in her office? It's something that I'm very sympathetic towards. I think she provides a wonderful service to the people of Lee County. It's something nobody wants to talk about, what happens when you go, but that's obviously something we need to take care of as we continue to grow.
I was going to bring up later too, but thank you for bringing it up. But yeah, I totally would support that. I think we all had the conversation. I know from firsthand, REMS people, personnel see it daily as they're waiting with the corpse. They have to wait sometimes for half a day for the show if they're in Hendry County or transport or something. And sometimes they have to use their personal vehicles. I'm sure you heard the same thing, but that's always been an issue with that office for some reason. They've been fully budgeted. So I would definitely support Rebecca's request for the new vehicles and for any type of expansion, because we saw that even during COVID with the space, limited space. So if we get those requests from her office, I definitely would support that.
I have no problem with that request. I was probably going to get to certain points like that when I had a little bit more specific numbers. I mean, I think reserves are important, so we understand how we manipulate those, where they need to be. And again, I said my piece earlier about net. Just trying to understand where we are, and then we can make choices on maybe there might be some other things. Right now, based on what I see, I agree with both questions. I agree with your comment. There might be 1 or 2 other small silos that we might want to put in, but it'll be easier for me to make that decision when I go to page 8 and that net number is 30 instead of 62. It's easier for me to look at that in a different way to say, okay, how do we, this is going to be a cash flow issue. I can tell you, having been through many downturns, including the pandemic, having run companies, cash flow is really going to be our issue we need to juggle. Because I think we have the greatest team going to go up to not only DC, where you've been, Commissioner, and Tallahassee, where we all have that opportunity to look at the types of things that we can, and then try to make the arguments in front of the REC. I mean, sales tax is a number that I'm glad we're trending upward, but the REC said that we're trending $7 billion ahead, and we're making up 50% of that. It's $2.1 billion. You know, I'd like to certainly want to make sure the other counties, but it's the citizens of Lee County that are spending that additional money as they rebuild their lives, whether it's a car, whether it's a boat, whether it's a house. That sales tax right now, we're over $700 million above me on any forecast in 7 months. So we're trending at a dollar amount. I'm just trying to look at real numbers, because I think there's 1 or 2 small items that you mentioned that we might do. I mean, I was talking with the hearing examiner. She had a few minor tweaks. It seemed like it was nickels and dimes. Maybe we talk about it, maybe we don't. I don't know what that number is, but right now, based on what I see, I like what I see. I agree with your comment, Commissioner Hammond, and I'm just indicating there might be 1 or 2 other silos like that we might want to consider when I have a little bit of a clearer picture.
Yeah, and I'm really open to those conversations too as we get there. I think, you know, that's what I like about starting the budget process so early. You know, you can talk about those things early on in the process, and then you don't give anybody last-minute surprises at the end. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything, Commissioner Greenwell? All set? All right. Mr. County Manager, do you have what you're looking for?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. This is a good start to the season for us, and we have a couple of things to deliver to you. One of it is the Commissioner Wayne's question on our net revenue position, and then we'll have some more conversation with the medical examiner about her growth needs.
Excellent. All right, thanks. If there's no further business before us then, we're adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good job, Pete.